Ladies and gentlemen, our next panel will be looking at what traditional energy business can learn from tech companies' leadership in diversity and inclusion. So please welcome Grace Kwan, the CEO of Hydrogen in Motion, Ishita Jain, the Impact Data and Insights Manager at Autodesk Foundation, Iliana Portuguese, the UK Head of Innovation Corporate at National Grid, and Baiva Benita Sheshkevichuta, the Head of Network and Communications at E.ON. She also will be the moderator of the panel. Hello to everyone.
Hello.
So we are a bit behind the schedule, so Viva, I think it's a good time to start our panel.
Thank you very much. So we have a very exciting topic today. Throughout the history, the fields of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics have been shaped by gender and in many cases also race bias. And unfortunately, the energy industry for very many years have not been an exception. While the business case for equality, diversity, and inclusion is already going stronger, much still needs to be done. And in this panel discussion today, we will try to talk and cover different topics around diversity and inclusion and why this topic is so critical to the energy industry. I'm super excited to have the three guests that have already been introduced to you, Ishita, Iliana, and Grace. Thank you very much for being a part of this discussion. And I would just like to directly start with the first question to Ishita. You work at the Autodesk Foundation, and you are responsible for measuring the social and environmental impact of the foundation's work. I know that you have recently concluded an analysis about diversity in your portfolio companies. And could you share some insights with us?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here and be a part of this discussion. Before I dive into the insights, I'll just take a couple of minutes to provide some context on, what we do and why we did this analysis. So Autodesk is a 3D software company that makes software products and services for architecture, engineering, construction, manufacturing, media, and education. And Autodesk Foundation is the philanthropic arm of Autodesk Inc. We provide risk-tolerant funding, technology, and talent to nonprofits, startups, social enterprises to help maximize and scale their impact. Through our work, we support organizations that work on climate change and inequality. So as you all know, 2020 was a year that challenged everyone's resilience, but also it was a year that made all of us reflect on some really critical issues. An analysis of diversity of leaders in our portfolio organizations was always something that we wanted to do. It was always on our list, but really 2020 helped us kind of get it at the top of the list and actually do it. This was prompted by the racial justice protests here in the US. And I think in terms of insights, three things really jumped at me as we did this. One, I think we undervalue the importance of surveying the current state. Unless we know where we're at today, we cannot make improvements. So that really came through in terms of this is something that we need to continue doing, understanding the representation of who we're investing in and how. The second thing was that the representation of leaders and leadership teams look different for different sectors and impact areas. So, for example, we had fewer startups led by women versus nonprofits. And this also starts throwing a light on the inequalities in the startup and funding ecosystem. And lastly, I'd say that we learned that we have a fairly balanced portfolio by gender, but there's just a lot more work that we need to do in bringing racial diversity into the organizations that we support.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing the first insights. So do you think, just based on the analysis and on the work that you have been doing, that race, gender, or nationality influence funding opportunities that those companies or smaller companies have?
Yes, I think in this case, my personal opinion is not as important as the facts. So, for nonprofit and startups led by people of color and women, access to financial capital is a significant challenge. Every year, an average of just 4% of philanthropic funding in the US goes to nonprofits led by Black or Latinx leaders. I have another fact. In 2019, female startup founders received only 2.8% of venture capital funding, and Black founders received about 1% of that venture capital funding. And so, very quickly you can see that there is a huge disparity in who gets that funding. And I think a lot of that is who gets the capital is also determined by who can get in front of the funders, right? Who can have access to those opportunities. There is a whole culture of, getting opportunities through networks, through referrals, through invite-only selection processes. And that is something we're really committed to changing on our end at the foundation, where we're really trying to open up sourcing and make it easier for different groups of people to apply for funding.
I have to speak up on funding.
Of course, Grace, go for it.
Yeah, this is a source of pain. So it's Grace Kwan, CEO of Hydrogen Motion, and as CEO, I do a lot of funding and pitches. And my experience, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ishta, is that people have already a built-in bias to fund, and it's like a buy purchase. You fund people that look like you and talk like you and sound like you, which is just a human thing to do. But do you have actual ways of running the competition to acknowledge the bias of your fundraise? So, for example, when questions that are asked to women or people that are different are fear-based. Are you going to keep your revenue stream? Are you going to be able to achieve your technical target? Whereas questions that are asked to people that they want to fund are hope-based. Can you achieve the next target? Can you achieve the next scale of revenue? So it's just like buying a pair of pants. Women, if it makes your bum look big, then that's fear-based, and you're never going to buy it, right? If it fits and makes you look great, it's you're going to purchase. So people think that they have getting asked the same question, but fundamentally, it's the underlying emotion is different, and therefore it's pre-baked, the funding decision. I think it's a subconscious thing, and boards and funding agencies have to be aware of this bias.
Perfect. That was a great addition to the topic of funding. I'm looking towards Ileana. We talked about the challenges that the smaller companies are facing. You work in a multinational company. So what are the challenges that you have, and how do you find diversity?
Definitely, Vaya. I mean, I suppose at this stage, before going into that, I'll do a pitch. So within National Grid Group, we've got our corporate venture capital fund. This is led by Lisa Lambert in California, a Black female president and founder of the fund. So supposed less bias there for any entrepreneurs and innovators wanting to get in touch. That's my pitch to you, following Grace's comments. Large organizations, and not only large organizations like ours, but more importantly, utilities, which historically are monopolies, because even though we are a group, the majority of businesses within our group umbrella are monopoly utilities, both in the US and here in the UK, have a certain reputation, right? We are slow, we are ex-government owned, not very dynamic. And with that in mind, whilst we try our best to have that pipeline of diverse talent, and we do try our best. So companies that are more diverse have over 25% more likelihood to outperform its competitors. So this is really important. We do blind CV filtering and blind interviews. But interestingly, getting rid of that stigma and that brand is really difficult in order to attract that input of talent. So I've just finished, or I'm in the final stages of finishing a blind interviewing sprint. And everyone that has been blind interviewed is effectively of the same social, racial, and gender background. Not because of anything, but because the pipeline coming in we attract a certain profile of people, and not attracting that people, we need to learn how to touch minorities and to drive that diversity. So that for us is our biggest challenge, is attracting them and getting minorities to be interested in what we do.
Grace, what is your experience in that? So you've been in the industry also for quite some years. Do you see a positive change in terms of diversity and inclusion? And do you, as a tech company, attract more diverse audiences as part of your future employees?
Well, we have a CEO company. I've put in policy in place to specifically to address diversity and gender equality. So we have a 50% target, which we meet and exceed on both cases. I personally support a girls in STEM program. So we bring a high school intern and allow her to intern in our company to see what it's like to work in STEM, to be a theoretical physicist, to be a material scientist, or a chemist or a mathematician, or even see what it's like to be a female CEO. And I think we need to model it in order to be it. You know, if you've never worked in that field, you don't even know that it's possible. So that's, children of lawyers are lawyers, and children of doctors are doctors. So you need to give them the opportunity to even make that a dream, if you can't see it. So that, I think, is very important. But back to your question, do I see a change? I see a change in my organization. In other organizations, I think we need to actively support diversity, because it's not going to happen on its own. There's a lot of barriers that we think this is something I brought up to the team earlier, but we think our CVs are neutral and equal, and are a fair assessment of where we're at, but it's not. There are baked in barriers that, for example, for many female CVs, if you have children, you need to take time off for the actual childbirth process, and that time off shows up in your resume. So you might be searching for someone with 10 years experience, and female CV who've been in the workforce for the equivalent amount of time might be 5 years short. And are they? That's why they fall behind. And we don't have a way of, unless you actively try to balance that out, you're penalizing people for the biological necessities of starting a family. And we have that implicit bias baked in, and it doesn't go away. Women will take part-time jobs because they have childcare or senior care obligations that don't fit into a 9 to 5. So I know at my organization, I'm supporting my staff so that with flex time, so that they can have a position that's commensurate with their skill set and desires, and still have meet their unpaid obligations in the household.
Thank you,
So I won't
Iliana.
rant on forever.
No, it's absolutely interesting insights. Iliana, how about in your organization? So you already gave us a few insights about having blind interviews to increase the diversity in the teams. But we had actually this discussion just a few minutes before the panel started. How do we include everyone in the company, including also the leadership teams, employees, to be a part of this movement for diversity? Are there any good practices from your company on that?
Well, I'm not certain whether there are good practices. I mean, of course, there are good practices, but I think I would argue them tend to be pretty common sense, right? So the most important thing is to talk about it. So I think it's a subject that in general, it's not necessarily very much talked at executive leadership away days or at team away days or in general meetings. And one of the things that we've definitely worked on in the last couple of years is to make certain it is part of all of the conversations at leadership and at management level, and that it is given the thorough, I suppose, viewing it deserves and conversations it deserves. I think it's also very important for people to share their experiences and their challenges that they face. And I think another point that we touched on previously before we joined the call is sometimes in this conversation around diversity and inclusion, we tend to group people together, right? And I'm not certain this grouping of people is necessarily extremely valuable. So one of the things I was recently unaware of, right, in terms of gender, females, is the different challenges Black females face compared to me, for example. The hair situation, I had never thought about it until I was in a meeting and this was brought up to me. And so talking about things, bringing them to light, discussing people's experiences, what will allow us to reflect on what is right and what is wrong, what is normal and what shouldn't be normal, and have the sort of conversations we should be having in order to make progress in this area. So I think that's definitely key. I think what's also definitely key is that we differentiate between equality and equity. So what shouldn't be normal, and have the sort of conversation. Sorry, that was the website coming up live. So is the difference between equity and equality. I think the conversation around diversity and inclusion should not be around equality, but should be around equity. And what do we need to do as organizations and as a society to make it an equitable society for us all? So those are my two key points, and apologies for that.
No problem at all. Thank you so much. Ishita, what is your take on that, especially on the part of equality or inclusion? What could you say from the experience from your company? What would be the key or the key activities or key actions that you are currently already taken to increase that?
Yeah, I think, from our perspective, we've been a part of a cultural transformation. We have a very active diversity and belonging team that's, kind of working from the inside to build this culture of inclusion and belonging, building a place where everyone's welcome from all different backgrounds and perspectives and beliefs. I'm also a part of the Autodesk Women's Network, which is our, ERGs within the company. And I think there is an active role that the ERGs themselves play in bringing that culture, because it's not just, like you said, it's not just about, being able to bring in all these different, like, diverse people and perspectives, but it's like, how comfortable do they feel how included do they feel, and that kind of builds a place for being able to bring more people in. So I would say that's something we're actively working on.
Grace, a question to you now. The topic of our panel discussion suggests that the traditional energy companies can learn from tech companies in terms of diversity and inclusion. Do you think that it is a challenge that mainly utilities have, or is this a universal problem?
Well, I think there are a lot of barriers that we don't necessarily have support to get people of diverse backgrounds through, whether it be funding, whether it be access to programming, whether it be access to customers. As a small company, the SMEs, I see a lot of women in STEM. I mean, they're only 10% of the population, but we're heavily in science, so I see a lot of them. Very bright people, and they should be running their own companies. They should be more representative. But as it goes up in the ladder, how many female CEOs are there at the table? I'm typically the only person, and it's tragic. Where are those bright little eggs? They're being weeded out because of the system that we have. We are selecting out key talent, and it's negatively impacting the progress and what we're getting as a product, as a society. What we introduce as products are for the people that run the companies, and if they're not diverse, you don't get diverse products. That's the reality.
Thank you. I think I have one question actually to you all. We were talking about the diversity and inclusion. We all agree that there is a challenge there and we need to overcome it. And we all agree that energy sector is currently still, let's say, moving forward, but slowly moving forward in terms of diversity. Is the energy sector actually already ready to lead by example? And can we be, in 5 years, this sector, the industry, that will be the most diverse from, let's say, to compare to other sectors? Grace, what's your take on that?
Well, my question is it up to the private sector to challenge the equity barriers that women face, for example, of having taken time off for childbirth and raising children? So I remember back in the day, and this just shows how old I am, there was a conversation of corporations putting up daycares and actually internally supporting that in order to so that their employees can of both genders can come to work and not have to worry about their children picking up their kids, etc. That's no longer the case. It's expected that the society will pick that up, but that's still a very tangible barrier. What are organizations doing to address that? How are we allowing people to fulfill their mandate as in their gender and their who they are? What programs are we putting in place to support that? So do we have flex time? Do we have ability to childcare support? Do we have paternal and maternal leaves that support these kind of flexibilities? And if the answer is no, then we're still supporting a model that's very oriented around a essentially autonomous male figure. And if you don't change the policy, you won't get different outcomes. You have to change the recipe to get a different omelet, right?
Liliana, do you agree with that? As a representative of a very big company, that is the energy sector, from your perspective, ready, those are the big corporates, ready to lead by example? Or do you also see that there's a big push needed from the public sector, from the governments?
So, I mean, I think this is a challenge for everyone. What I would say around the energy sector is that we are at the center of the environmental agenda. We need to change to achieve the climate change targets we need to. So if we want to deliver a net zero world that is sustainable and equitable around the world, this is key to the delivery of that ambition. I really do not believe that we can deliver a sustainable, environmentally friendly, affordable, fair, and equitable world without the energy sector being composed of a diverse group of individuals that fairly represents the world as a whole. So I think that we are, I mean, I've got no idea, to be honest, who's leading, but what I can say is that we are striving to make a huge difference, and that if we want to deliver what we aim to, this has to be a core part of the agenda.
Thank you. Ishita, the final words from your side on that topic.
Yeah, I think I completely agree with what Ileana said. You know, energy sector is sort of we're all dependent on the energy sector, and it kind of intersects with everything all of us do. And so I really think that when it comes to tech companies, there's definitely more risk tolerance. The cultural standards for these companies is really high, and there's a lot of peer pressure. We have one organization leading the way, and others feel the need to follow. And I hope that we can see that trickle to the energy sector as well, and other organizations there.
Ishita, Grace, Ileana, thank you so much for your time and for this great contribution to the panel discussion. I think this is such a big topic, and we could spend hours talking about that. The energy industry today, the industry that we have today, has already improved, and we saw great examples today of how we are focusing on diversity, inclusion topic, and hopefully making the situation better, but we're still not there where we have to be. And we have very complex challenges to combat, and we definitely need diversity of thought to succeed that. Rolandas, back to you. Thank you all for taking part in this panel discussion.
Thank you so much, Vaiva.
Bye.
Yeah, I don't know if you've seen, but we saw a very cute moment during your panel discussion, because on the Grace screen, we saw the cat in front of the camera. And what's the name of the cat?
Blackie. He's my diversity element for the table.
Oh, yeah, that was really, really cute moment. Thank you so much again. We wish you the very best of luck. And we are moving forward with our fireside chat.